Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Give My Head podcast. I'm Tim McGarry, joined by my comedy colleague
Damon Quinn.
You know the format by now, ladies and gentlemen. This is a show about 80-something, isn't it, Dan? What are we, nearly 80 episodes in? I cannot believe it, we've made it this far. We have no sponsors this week, but if you want to sponsor this podcast, you should, because we have excellent sponsors like Phoenix Energy and the McElnenny's Bar and various other people who'll help your business, because there are lots of people listening to this programme, because we get very exciting and interesting guests. I'm going to introduce one very shortly, but I have a couple of things to plug. Number one, ladies and gentlemen, this very week, we are finishing our tour of Give My Head Peace Live. We're in the Grand Opera House from Tuesday the 24th right up until the 28th. 7 shows. There's still some tickets left. Late in the week, the Friday and the Saturday are almost gone, aren't they, Damon? Are they almost gone?
Nearly, but there are still a few. If you get
tickets.
in there, you'll get a couple of tickets.
Get a couple of tickets. So 7 shows in the Grand Opera House. Give My Head Peace Live. I can thoroughly recommend it. We've been all over Northern Ireland already. We've been in everywhere from Armagh to, we've been in Dunleary. We were in the Pavilion. We're in Castleblaney. We're all over the place. It's going for. I recommend it. It's very funny.
Yes, we're doing our bit for United Ireland. We're taking the show down south.
Absolutely. We're cross border now. We should get a grant for that. And speaking of which, I'm also starting my new solo show in a few weeks' time. That's Tim McGarry. Height of Nonsense. I'm all over the place. Look that up. You'll put a link up for that, won't you, Dan? Thank you very much, Dan. Dan's going to put a link up for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted to welcome to this show a very special guest. Some sports legend, sports commentating legend. We're going to talk about, he's probably best known as The Nation Holds Its Breath, but we're going to talk about The Nation Holds Its Breath, but that's kind of are you sick of hearing about The Nation Hold Its Breath, George?
Never. It was such a moment.
It was such a moment. It is, ladies and gentlemen, the RTE sports commentating legend that is Mr. George Hamilton. George, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I apologise. See, he told me that we were getting George Hamilton, but I thought he meant George Hamilton, the actor. so I had all these questions prepared, about Love at First Bite and Godfather 3 and stuff like that. But
the A-Team? Yes, I'm afraid Damon doesn't do sports.
Yeah, I thought George Hamilton.
No.
It is a rather common name, and there have been a few of me about. And I did once upon a time when I was working with Radio 2 in England, the BBC. I was given the task of interviewing a country singer by the name of George Hamilton the Fourth.
Oh, yeah.
And the poor man's no longer with us. And I actually did the interview long distance from the studio in London. Mm-hmm. And in the course of the interview, it was going really well. He seemed to be a lovely fella. And I said, I must ask you, how is it that we share a name? And he said, well, in my case, my daddy was George, and his daddy was George, and his daddy was George too. So that made me George the Fourth.
That's the fourth, yeah.
And for years afterwards, he would send me a Christmas card.
Oh, wow.
So, that was quite the connection. So I forgive you for...
your confusion, but so I apologise on behalf of the Give My Head podcast. Damon doesn't really do sport, but you are an absolute legend. Now we're going to talk about your career. Can I start very early? You're the RTE. You were RTE with for many years. You've kind of left recently. Is that?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to talk about that?
Of course you are.
Are you pissed off with RTE?
No. I'm still with RTE. You see,
I know you're on the Lyric FM.
I still do the Lyric show on Saturdays and Sundays, and if they'll have me any other time, I'll pop up and sub for the other classical music presenters. No, it came to a point, and you'll know that RTE went through difficult times in recent years, and in the turmoil that took place then, the head of sport left for reasons that we don't need to go into, and there was a replacement head of sport, and the whole landscape changed. There was then a replacement director general, so the whole thing went up in the air. And I'm considering my situation. Obviously, I was never on staff. I was always a contract.
You're freelance.
Freelance, and the contract would come around every 3 years, and then it became every 2 years. And obviously, in your head, you're thinking, what's going to happen here? Yeah. And so I'm kind of testing the water, holding up the grass in the wind and so on, and thinking, this might not be going on for much longer.
Right.
I should consider myself, because as my old Scottish grandmother used to say, always look after number one. And you may love your work, but your work won't necessarily love you.
Yes.
So you have to kind of look after number one.
Write that down. We should take that lesson, because we have it in the BBC. We need to look at
in that context. And bear in mind, I did begin this by saying that the RTE head of sport left. He was at the time head of sport, Ryle Nugent.
Right.
And by now he was the head of Premier Sports, who do international sports coverage and are also based in Dublin. So, without going into too much detail, I was able to leave the sports department in RTE and rejoin Ryle, who had been my boss in RTE in Premier Sports.
Okay.
And there was no falling out with RTE. I mean, I had the most cordial relationship with the new Director General, Kevin Backhurst, but he now employs me as a presenter on the cultural station Lyric, and I do my sport for Premier Sports.
Excellent, excellent. How does a fella from Belfast end up on RTE?
That's a good question.
How does a fella from Belfast make one of the most iconic statements ever? The nation holds its breath. The whole Irish nation. Is it the whole Irish nation that held its breath, or is it just the 26 counties?
I think I can actually bat a bit of this back at you, given your new venture about the height of nonsense, and ask you, how does a wee man from the Craiga Road end up doing this? Because that I have asked myself that question on many, many occasions. And it's really quite simple how it all happened, because I didn't realise beyond having an itch to scratch that I wanted to be in broadcasting. But once I got in, I was mad keen to get in. And again, back then, I had presented Good Morning Ulster for BBC. I was the first presenter of Good Morning Ulster on Radio Ulster in 1975.
I knew you were on Radio Ulster. I didn't know you were the first.
John Bennett, the late John Bennett, was the first voice at midnight on New Year's Day, 1975. And then they went to Radio 2. And then at 20 to 7, an odd time to start, but at 20 to 7, I said Good Morning Ulster, and that was the start of it. And the local programmes at the time were myself and Good Morning Ulster, and Gloria Honeyford with a taste of honey at 11.
Whatever happened to her?
But anyway, so I did that for 2.5 years, having got in the door as a continuity announcer and newsreader. But the early mornings were killing me, and I realised that while current affairs was huge in the 70s, as you can imagine, I really wanted to be in sport. There was a lot happening. There was indeed. But I really wanted to be in sport.
Right.
And a few ducks aligned themselves, and I found myself commentating on a football match in Rotterdam. Danny Blanchflower had just been appointed the Northern Ireland manager, and his first big move was to recall from the wilderness George Best.
Right. Oh, yes.
And BBC Northern Ireland covered that game live. The first time they'd ever done an away match live in the circumstances, because it ran across the 9 o'clock news, as was on BBC One. And that was sacrosanct. So they had to go to London to get permission to opt out, because there wasn't the opting out facility that there is now in the 21st century. London accepted the case, but what it meant was you can't record the news, otherwise it's not the news. So the news had to be read twice. So Kenneth Kendall read the news for the Scotland, England and Wales, and then at 9:30, when the match was over and Northern Ireland had drawn 2-2, he read it again for Northern Ireland, beginning with the headline, "And Northern Ireland have drawn against the Netherlands in Rotterdam." So anyway, I did that. That, of course, because in the south there was only one channel at the time, they watched a lot of BBC and UTV, and they had taken note of this guy up in Belfast. So fast forward 2 years to the 1978 World Cup, in which that Dutch team figured prominently, got to the final.
I remember it well, Argentina.
Yeah. So RTE were covering the World Cup for only the second time. The first time had been in West Germany in 74. In 78, they were going to cover it in Argentina, but Argentina is a vast country, and they figured to do it properly that they would need to have 4 commentators. How are we going to do that? Because they didn't have a huge sports department. So the principal football commentator, Jimmy McGee, the second commentator would be the radio commentator, Philip Green. They then hired Billy George, who was a journalist on the Cork Examiners it then was, who did a lot of contributions for them. And then who are we going to get for the fourth one? And one bright spark, who became a very good friend of mine, a senior editor called Mike Horgan, he said, "What about the boy up in Belfast?" So they said, they sent me a letter. That's the way it worked in those days. Fred Cogley, the head of sport, sent me a letter. I wonder what's this coming from RTE. I said I wouldn't want to raise a hair. I'd never heard the question before. The phrase before. I wouldn't want to raise a hair because somebody in RTE might be offended. But we're thinking, would you be available to go to the World Cup? So it was almost a telegram back to Fred Cogley. Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's how it began.
Oh wow, brilliant. Because you're Craiga Road man.
Yeah.
East Belfast.
East Belfast. christened in the same church as George Best.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
What's
Okay.
the best now? I think I've heard of him.
You've heard, yes,
Well,
you've heard of him.
Thank God we've got David back on the show.
Yes, I've heard of him.
He was quite a good footballer.
Yeah,
He appeared on Give Me Head Peace once.
He did indeed.
He did.
Yes,
we
yeah,
know
worked
about-
perfect too. Yeah, he played. He appeared as himself, and I think the plot was
It's a very silly plot where
Carl had been a brilliant footballer when he was young, but the postman had brought the letter from Man United to
Celtic. It was Celtic.
Oh, Celtic was it? Yes.
I was his horrible father, and
yeah.
I stopped him getting a part for Celtic, playing
Yeah.
for Celtic, because I wanted him to go to an anti-internment march.
And then they interviewed George Best with Jackie Fulton's interviewing him. Were you the best or was it Pele? And he goes, no, it was actually this kid called Cal. I don't know why he ever took it up, But George turned up and he was word perfect.
That's wonderful to
New
hear.
script.
Yeah.
Yep. We could use him on our show, couldn't we?
Yeah.
I must say, anytime any dealings with him, he was wonderful. Really,
Yeah.
really was. A lovely man off the pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely professional.
Yeah.
Turned up, did the gig, and that was him away.
I remember that match in the 2-2 draw.
Yeah.
That was
Spence.
Yeah.
Derek Spence.
Derek Spence.
Yeah.
So Craig a Roadman, I think you say you're an only child, did you
I am,
say?
yeah.
Yeah. But your father actually was a footballer as
Oh
well.
yeah. He played for Cliftonville.
But amateur or...
Back in the day when it was definitely amateur, and they never won a match, and every year they had to apply for re-election, and nobody turned
Yes.
up. Solitude was the most aptly named football ground because there was never anybody
Well,
there.
the story was Sorry, I'm a big Cliftonville fan. The joke is we used to have we had a bit of a bad run called the 20th century. Somebody once rang up,
Yeah.
Cliftonville said, what time's the match start? There's 5 of us coming, and said, what time can you get here?
Well, can I just tell you a story about that? Because I'd gone to RTE at this stage because of the World Cup, and then they'd offered me a job when I came back from Argentina. But BBC Northern Ireland still hadn't replaced me. So the Cup final of '79.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, Tony Bell, can he
Yes.
fix it?
Who said that?
George Hamilton.
Absolutely.
Oh my God! I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's one of the most important moments of my life up until 2024 when we won it again.
I know. I was reminded of it so
course,
often.
Cliftonville,
Of course.
I was reminded so often of that, and that you will appreciate when I told you my dad played for Cliftonville, and he took me to matches as a kid,
Yeah.
from knee high to grasshopper. That was such a moment to me when you consider, like, I didn't do the World Cup final in 1978,
Yeah.
but I had done Brazil, I had done Iran, I had done the Netherlands, I did the wonderful Scotland game where Archie Gemmell slalomed
yeah.
through the Dutch defence. I did those games. I had to have done Brazil. The wee man for the Craig Road on his first World Cup does all of that. But Windsor Park that afternoon in 1979 was as big in my experience
Yeah.
because it was the team that I had followed that were forever applying for re-election.
Your dad
that if they
played
beat
for.
Bangor,
Yeah.
that my dad played for. And suddenly here they are in the cup final.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and I've got the gig. It's unbelievable.
My connection is obviously, my uncle Kevin
Yeah.
he was my father's younger brother. And
Yes.
My father was a club doctor, and a whole lot of relatives still involved in the club, and that's why.
Yeah.
We've a long connection with it. But your father actually played with
He did.
Kevin.
He played with them, and Kevin McGarry was a hero of his.
Right.
And so when he would have been taking me, he would say, "Watch for the number 8. He's a great player."
Yeah.
And he was. And I, as a child, couldn't understand how this wonderful footballer, and he was playing for this team that never won a match.
Never won a match.
Yeah.
They were amateur in those days.
They
They
were.
only became semi-professional in the mid-70s
Yes.
when they started getting fans and becoming...
Exactly.
79 was
Was
a hell of a
the
day.
first of it? Yeah.
A hell of a day. You remember the big riot before? There
Was there a riot beforehand?
Oh yeah, there was before that.
I'd have been
At
on the top.
match.
I'd have been on the top of the roof at Windsor, and maybe didn't get to see it. No, I just remember maybe it's selective memory, but just this. At the end of the game, the transmission's over. Cliftonville have got the cup, and I take a deep breath and think, I can't believe I've done that, because as a kid pretending to be a commentator,
Yeah.
I would have had Cliftonville winning everything.
Yeah.
And here I'd actually done it, and they had done
Yeah.
it, and I'd done the commentary.
So your dad, what was his job then? He was an amateur footballer.
Amateur
but
footballer. He sold insurance, and
Right.
he was a packer in Somersets in the Dublin Road before that, and then World War II intervened, and he was called up, but he was injured,
Right.
so he never got beyond York, so he never
Right.
saw action.
Right.
But when he came back, because he'd been in the forces, he got a job in the civil service. and that was what he did for
Right.
the
And
rest
then
of his
played football
working
instead.
life.
And
Yeah.
did that where the sports
Yeah.
love of sports
Oh,
comes
yeah,
from, your
absolutely.
father?
Because if he wasn't taking me, I mean, if Cliftonville played at home every other week, on the Saturdays that they weren't at home, we didn't travel. We stayed at home. My mother's father was a home baker, and he had a shop on the Woodstock Road, and she would work in the shop on a Saturday afternoon. So it was just my dad and myself and the dog in the house. And I'd kick a tennis ball up and down the hall while the light programme, as it was playing the commentary on the second half of a First Division match in England. So he and I would have Campbell's soup for our lunch. You know, you might remember Campbell's soup that had
Everybody called
alphabet.
Campbell was called Soupy in my day.
But it had the alphabet in the. It was like minestrone.
Oh,
but
yes,
but
but
the alphabet was in the soup. We'd have that every Saturday, and then we'd listen to the football on the radio, and I'd kick the tennis ball up and down.
So you're an only child.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I have an only child. Well, I hope it's an only. Funny enough, he works in sport.
Really?
Yeah, he's a sports producer for Reuters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's based in Mexico City.
Gosh.
Yeah, but it was kind of probably centred me not being into sport.
Yes.
You know, I was destined to have a child who loves sport and who works in sport.
Who rebelled. But it's funny, you know, the connections. You say that in that regard. I am an only child. I'm a commentator. There are so many of us.
Yeah.
And I think it may be to do with the fact that we spent so much of our time on our own.
Right.
Because you go through the whole. Fred Cogley, I mentioned, was the commentator as well as the head of sport in RTE. A current Gaelic Games commentator for RTE, Marty Morrissey. The eminent rugby commentator for the BBC, friend of mine, Jim Neely.
Oh, Jim Neely.
All only children. Jim Sherwin, the late Jim Sherwin, who did rugby for RTE. He was an only child, and a famous Radio 2 DJ, Ray Moore, whom I got to meet when I worked in London. He was an only child as well. So they're only children.
Something in it.
Yes.
Definitely.
Wow.
Yeah.
My partner's son is studying sports journalism at Liverpool, and he's an only child. Have you any advice for him?
Keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah,
keep
make-
going. Genuinely,
yeah,
because I mean,
absolutely.
it's a different world now. It's all
God,
completely
it
different
is
from.
so different to what it was when we were starting. I mean, there were no courses in journalism, never mind sports
Yeah.
journalism. When I was starting off, it was. I mean, my third level education in sports broadcasting was courtesy of a woman called Joy Williams, who was the number 2 to the head of sport in Belfast, Malcolm Kellard, and ultimately became the head and the first female head of sport in the BBC, the whole of the BBC.
Right.
And she identified talent, if I can put it like that, and nurtured talent. And the ones that came through under Joy, Jim Neely, I mentioned, Mike Nesbitt, ex-leader of the Unionist Party,
Has been in this very room.
eminent broadcaster in his day, Mark Robson.
Yeah.
All of those came through the BBC in Belfast under Joy,
Right.
who was, you know, a real nurturer of
Well,
talent.
can I ask a stupid question? Joy goes to you, okay, we want you to be a sports commentator. Go on, we'll take 79, Cliftonville, Portadown and play it. If you've never commentated before, how do you start? How do you go, oh, bloody hell, do you research?
Well,
do you,
yeah,
do
well,
you try it out? Or do you,
well, I think I wanted to, when I got in the door as a sports reporter, and my initial audition report was kind of parsed and pimped and pumped and whatever the words are, until it was right, so that I wouldn't use words like however, but I'd say but, because it's not like written journalism.
Yeah.
And I heard an example on the way in here where it described McGarry 77 as a such and such. You know, you don't say that. That's something that you read on the page in a paper.
Yeah.
But if you're reading the news on the radio, you don't say McGarry 77. You say McGarry who is 77. Or it's a different way.
Yeah.
So that was the start of getting the reports right. How the commentary came, I had to audition myself for that. They had commentators. So nobody was saying, "We think we'll turn you into a commentator." So I was sent along as a freelance reporter for Roundup, as it was then. Glentoran were playing Borussia Mönchengladbach. And I had
there's a
lived...
name to conjure
It's
with.
wonderful, and it's such a shame that they're not still prominent. But they were huge in the early
Yes, I
70s.
remember them,
And they were playing Glentoran in Europe, and I was sent along to get post-match interviews, to do a little 3-minute colour piece for the following morning's current affairs programme. So I was sent along with the big reel-to-reel over-the-shoulder tape recorder. Ewer was the brand name, and if you got a Ewer, you'd arrived because they trusted you to take this tape
But they were
recorder.
huge.
Yes, and they were, but they were huge. But Borussia Mönchengladbach, top team in Europe, European finalists, they brought a huge press corps with them, and there was no room in the oval press box for this occasional football reporter who was me. So they got me a seat in the stand. So here I am, in among Damon and Tim, watching the match with my tape recorder on my lap. And I'm thinking, they're not interested in me because they're Glens fans, and they're watching the match. I'm thinking, if I start this up and try to commentate on if a goal looks likely, and I might get lucky, because that's what they did on the Sports Sound programme on a Saturday. Harry Thompson and so on would go out with a tape recorder and try and capture the goals, and then they could illustrate their report with the goal. So I thought I would try and do this. Nobody said you should. Nobody offered me advice as to how to. So there were a few near misses, but there weren't many goals in the game, and I actually got them all. 2-1 or something. It was a low-scoring game, so it wasn't overloading my report. Right. Anyway, I took it back to Broadcasting House. I couldn't believe what I'd got, and I got the interviews that I was sent to get. So I wrote this report, but I illustrated it with the goals. Wow. And the following morning, when it was transmitted, Malcolm Kellard, the then head of sport, he's at home in Dunmurry, shaving in the bathroom, and he cut himself when he heard it. He said, your man's done a commentary. And that was it.
Brilliant. And that was you started?
That was me started. And they said, yeah. So they took, to continue that and how it worked with Joy. Joy set it up that I would go to Twickenham to do a rugby match because they were full of football commentators, but they were a bit short on rugby. She took me to Twickenham for England-Ireland in 1974. I thought I was broadcasting back to Radio 4 NI, but I wasn't. I was on closed circuit to Broadcasting House where sat the radio head of sport, Cliff Morgan, who was listening to me while watching the match on the TV. And after the match, Joy took me to Cliff, who was a really wonderful rugby player in his day, but a very, very eminent broadcaster and commentator. And he talked me through my commentary and gave me the foolscap sheet with the do's and don'ts for the commentator. Wow. And that was the crowning tutorial. Right. And then I was launched, and away I went. And it was wonderful.
Wow. Can I go back slightly to East Belfast? Are you any politics in your family or anything like that? You're not interested?
No, on the contrary. Don't be going out there and saying anything. Just keep your head down was the way of it.
So was there any issue then when you did join RTE? Was there any issue from people here or from people down south going, what's a naughty coming down here to steal our jobs?
I would have expected that there might have been, but I can honestly say in the 40 plus, nearly 50 years that I would have been involved in broadcasting down there, it never reared its head in any meaningful way. There would have been
people that go, I don't like that accent.
No, it's funny because there were others, and you probably remember from Hollywood in County Down here, Derek Davis, the late Derek Davis, made a huge hit.
Huge.
Cyril Smith read the news on UTV, read the news on RTE. So too did Kate Smith. Yeah. There has been Barry Cowan, the late Barry Cowan, spent a time with RTE as well. So there was always a degree of cross fertilization, and I don't think that the thought ever arose. If you were a bit like if you're good enough, you're old enough. Yeah. If you're good enough, it doesn't matter where you've come from. If we can live with how you sound as long as you're not unpleasant on the ear. Yeah. But I can honestly say that never happened, and I would also say there would be people here from where I'm from. My family, extended family, might say, well, why would they want you? but the reason that RTE was attracted really was when working in Belfast, where I have immense fondness for the BBC in Belfast because that's where I started.
Do you live in Dublin? Sorry to interrupt.
I live between County Wicklow and County Down.
All right, okay.
But to say that BBC in Belfast have a great fondness for them is an understatement. But the thing was, and this was how I felt at the time, the BBC in Belfast would be covering something because there was local interest in it, and that's as it should be. RTE would cover it because it was there, because they were an actual national broadcaster. So, and it was probably easier to get in and on with a smaller national broadcaster like RTE than in the big behemoth that is the BBC
in London.
Yeah.
Do you have to be interested in lots of other sports? I mean, you've done the Olympics and all sorts of things.
Well, it helped.
It helped. I mean, do you love other sports, or do you go, oh God, the hockey?
No,
for fuck's sake.
No. Hey, I commentated on the Ireland women in the World Cup final in hockey. If you're presented with something like that, you'll say, "Gosh, yes, please, I'll do that." But no, it's obviously you do bear in mind, and I've no background in the GAA, so it would be completely wrong of me to present myself and say I want to do an All Ireland, because that's just not right, because I shouldn't. But in terms of something like athletics, if there isn't somebody who is proficient in athletics and available to do it.
Right.
And I'm a professional commentator, and I have an interest in it, and I can. And it's not like something that you would be steeped in, like the GAA. Then I hold my hand up and say, if you want, I'll do. And I did athletics, and I loved doing.
You've done the
track and
Olympics
field.
loads of time.
I did, yeah. I did 11 Olympics.
11 Olympics and a many World Cups.
12 men's, and 2 women's.
That's 48 years, my calculation. Is that right? 12 fours and 48. Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was good mental arithmetic.
It seems like the ideal job if you love sport. You get to travel the entire world. You get to watch football, which you love, and you get to presumably relax and have a small snifter afterwards. And
Well, you have to
beforehand.
debrief, don't you?
You have to debrief.
And like a player, the adrenaline has been pumping, so you cannot just stop, go off to the scratcher and say, I'm finished now, I'm off to bed.
Of course, you were there for all of the charting.
Well,
the whole charting era.
Damon, I'd have to say I surfed that wave. I was very, very lucky. I mentioned being in London, and it was for domestic reasons that I came back from London principally, but also because there was a bigger opportunity in RTE than there had been when I'd left to go to London. And Charlton was appointed 18 months after I came back. And that was the Charlton era beginning. And that lasted 10 years, which would never happen nowadays in terms of a span of international management. And there were so many other factors involved because Ireland was, the Irish economy was emerging from its moribund state. The society was changing. It was becoming more liberal, less entrenched, less conservative. There were lots of things happening, and
most importantly, we beat the English in 1988.
Started the whole thing.
The
rolling.
Euros, wasn't it?
Yeah,
88?
the Euros,
Stuttgart.
Euro '88. Yeah, but that was the start of. Well, the start of it was actually several months before, because the group that the Republic of Ireland had found itself in had 5 teams, which meant they didn't all play on the one night. So it was Ireland who finished their programme early, and there were matches to be played, and they were idle, and their job was done, and they were high up the table, but it was likely they'd be overtaken by Bulgaria, because Bulgaria were playing Scotland in the last match to decide who would win the group to qualify for West Germany in '88, and Bulgaria never lost at home, and Scotland just were no good. So that was fine. We're out, fair enough. But that's Charlton's first tournament, and they'd come close before under other managers like John Giles and Owen Hand. So, nothing lost, nothing ventured, nothing gained. But Tim O'Connor, who was the head of sport, who was the reason RTE Sport has the reputation that it has, that it earned over the years, that may not be quite what it was then, but at that time when Tim was in charge, he was the visionary who saw the way to project RTE Sport. And he saw this as an opportunity. He said, if Ireland are to qualify for their first major tournament, we should really be there for the moment. So he convinced the bosses, which was smaller organisations.
To send you to Bulgaria.
Sent me to Bulgaria for the match against Scotland. Now, odds on they're going to lose, and it'll be a damp squib. But what happens? Bulgaria play, Scotland play, and it's a pretty dull match, and Bulgaria aren't really that impressive, and Scotland are doing okay, and it's still 0-0, and it's late in the game. And the ball goes out to the far side as I'm looking, and a Scottish player receives the pass, and a Bulgarian comes in and cleans him out. And any other referee would have blown the whistle, there'd have been a free kick, Bulgaria would have reset, and who knows what would have happened. But the referee was an Austrian man with a wonderful name in political terms. He was called Helmut Kohl, same as the German Chancellor. Helmut Kohl displayed unbelievable perspicacity in waving the game on and playing advantage. Scotland came in from the wing, and suddenly the ball is at the feet of a substitute, Gary Mackay, who has never before scored an international goal. And Gary Mackay shoots and scores, and Scotland win in Bulgaria.
And Ireland
qualify.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's even a wonderful story that follows that. We'd gone out with the Scottish Football Party, and we'd flown to Bulgaria in a chartered aircraft, which had stayed on the ground for the 2 days we were there. So it hadn't been re-catered. So on the way back to Glasgow, which was a long old flight, there were no drinks for anybody on the plane who would be officials, selected supporters and press. No drinks for anybody except the players for whom they'd held back some beers. So we're on the plane, and my late colleague Maurice Reedy and myself, we're in the row 32 because we were the Johnnies come lately, taking up the kind of last seats on the plane. There's a spare seat beside us, the three at the back of the plane. There's myself and Maurice, and we're just kind of sitting there thinking, God, this is great. We're going to be going to the Euros. And down the plane comes Ian St. John, who'd been covering the match for ITV, and who was a man I knew because it's a small club, the International Comedy Club. So if you're covering a match, you know all these people. So Ian came and he said, there's only one place I can sit on this plane on the way back to Glasgow. It's with the two Irish lads, because you're the ones who have sort of
really enjoyed
to
it.
celebrate. So the three of us are sitting there, we're having a good old chinwag, and Ian St. John was a lovely, lovely man. When down the plane comes another guy whom I knew from being on the trip. He was the Scott Ball travel agent, Scott Ball being a travel agency owned by the Scottish Football Association, and he's Mr. Scott Ball. And he's carrying a plastic bag. And he sits down at another vacant seat just across the aisle, and he said, I know there's nothing on the plane for you guys, but hey, in the circumstances, this has to happen. And he pulled out of the bag a bottle of malt whiskey. It was his duty free. He was taking home from he'd bought in Glasgow on the way out. He said, we have to have this. And so we kind of floated all the way back to Glasgow. And we arrived.
Celebrating Ireland, yeah.
Celebrating Ireland. We arrived in the wee small hours in Glasgow airport. And Maurice and I were going to stay.
Well refreshed.
Well refreshed and well awake, wide awake. And we were going to stay in the Holiday Inn, which is just kind of across the concourse. So we emerged from behind the customs doors in the company of the Scots pushing their trolleys. And who's standing there? Only Packy Bonner, who's the Celtic goalkeeper at the time. And he'd come to the airport to congratulate these guys that he knew mostly as Scottish footballers.
Right.
Thank you so much, guys.
He's now going to a music tournament.
And he had under his arm all the Daily Record of the Glasgow Herald, all the rest, the next morning's papers. And he saw us coming off, and he'd no idea that the match was on RTE. And he said, here, you have to have these. Read all about it. And he was just so high.
Wow.
And it was a wonderful, wonderful time.
Wow.
Jack Charlton was essentially an honorary Irishman.
Oh, yeah, he
If he
became-
stood for president, he probably would have won.
He would. And it's amazing to think the first match that Jack Charlton was in charge of was against Wales, a friendly in the spring of... it would have been 86, and it was a Lansdowne Road in the old days. There were no floodlights. The match was in the afternoon, and the big east stand towered away to the far side of where we would have been as commentators. And away at the back of the stand, there was a banner, and it said, "Go home, Union Jack."
Yeah.
And that's how it began,
Yeah,
you know.
right, yeah.
There was no real... There were those who didn't want him there.
didn't want an Englishman. Yeah.
And
Did you know him personally?
I did.
Yeah.
I actually had known him before he got the job because he had worked when he was between jobs as a manager in England as a summariser for, as they called it, for Radio 2, where I was working on radio commentary. So I'd sat beside him at football grounds in England on occasion, so I kind of knew him. And it was funny because on the night that he was appointed, the FAI, who weren't great at their press relations, they'd tried to set it up that Bob Paisley, the former Liverpool manager, would get the job. But there'd been a three-way tie. John Giles and Jack Charlton had applied for the job. And when they went for the second round of voting, one of the representatives, the representative of the schools and the defence forces, decided to change his vote and went for Charlton. So they'd no preparations to announce.
Right, okay.
And it's a Friday night at 7 o'clock in the dark in Merrion Square. And out of the door, there was no kind of press room inside, no reception room, no nothing. So the great and the good of the Dublin press were assembled on the street in Merrion Square, waiting for the door to open. And the door opened, and they announced that Charlton had been appointed, but that was it. They closed the door again, and they're all looking at each other. The press are all looking. Well, how do we
Thanks
get
for this great
Yeah,
story.
and where do we get the story for tomorrow's paper? But because I knew Charlton, because I'd worked in the BBC, and it was only a year since I'd been there, my little black book had a lot of numbers in it that could be helpful to us. One of those numbers was Jimmy Armfield, who also worked as a co-commentator.
Yeah. Jimmy Armfield?
Blackpool was his big team. Played right back for England and missed the World Cup in '66 because of injury. So my colleague Stephen Alkin and myself, we went round to the Shelbourne Hotel, no mobiles, and said to the girl on the desk, as I knew had the Shelbourne set up with cubicles of telephones in the lobby, can you give us a line each in there? We'll pay you when we're done. And of course, she was all excited because Ireland had got a new manager. She was now in on the game. So Stephen went into one booth with a couple of numbers, and I went into another, and it was the Jimmy Armfield call that did it. He said, "I won't give you Jack's number, but I'll ring Pat, his wife, and see if he's about, because I know at the weekend he goes up onto the moors to his. So anyway, Jimmy rang Pat, and Pat told Jimmy that Jack would be ringing her in the morning, and Jimmy, at our instruction, had said, well, any way you could get him to come into the BBC studio in Newcastle and we'll do an interview. So by that circuitous route, with several phone calls back and forth to Jimmy Armfield, we got Jack Charlton the following morning, and we got the scoop. Wow. And it cost 39 old pounds in phone calls at the Shelbourne Hotel.
But the Jack Charlton documentary about it is amazing. It's a fabulous piece of work, isn't it? I mean, it's have you seen it? It's really, if you're not a sports fan, I mean, it's amazing, and the bit with the Alzheimer's and stuff at the end, it's really moving. But really, was he as decent a person as he came across?
He absolutely was. And
I mean, he was tough, and he was.
Of course, he was tough, and he displayed that toughness, and he deployed that toughness. But there was never. Ever anything left over afterwards. You know, I've made my decision, that's it. You don't like it, okay. But then the next day, it's all forgotten about, and we're back to square one. Everything is fine. And I think that's best borne out by the fact that late in the day, when he was already not well, and Niall Quinn was a lovely, lovely man, had this idea that he would have an evening for Jack and assemble as many of the old players as he possibly could in the K Club. And how I got involved was he asked me to MC it. And anyway, we were liaising about who was coming, and basically everybody who'd played for Jack said, yeah, I'll be there. Yeah, I'll be there. And Niall rang me up one day and he said, there's one guy I can't get hold of, Terry Phelan, former Manchester City left back. And I said, God, I've no number for Terry, but I'll ring around. So I rang around, I drew a complete blank. And then one Saturday, for some reason, I'm in the car with Linda, my wife, and we wouldn't normally be listening at 5 o'clock to PM on Radio 4. We'd have had the sports results on, but presumably she had control of the radio. So we're listening to the news at PM. And then there comes on a report about there was a terrible flood in India. And the presenter said, well, now we can go live to wherever. And the former Manchester City fullback, Terry Phelan, is coaching in the town, and he's on the... I can't believe this. I rang Niall. I said, I've just heard Terry Phelan on the radio. He's in India. If you get on to PM, they'll find you Terry Phelan. Terry Phelan came from India to be at Jack Charlton's night in the K Club.
Okay.
So I think
that's the respect he was held in. So some people kind of think sport isn't that important. And there are moments in life, the 79 Irish Cup was 2024, but there are moments that just... they go beyond people who like sport, and one of those is, of course, the Nation Holds Its Breath, 1990. You remember it, Damon, because we were in Dublin around that time. We were there. We were doing acting classes in Dublin, believe it or not.
We were at the Dublin Theatre School there.
We were at the Dublin Theatre School, and we were there for the match that they lost against
Italy.
That
was afterwards.
That was the one. After.
That was the one.
That's right.
But that was, and the team came back the day. Bizarre. Nelson Mandela arrived in Dublin the same day the Irish team came back. But the Nation Holds Its Breath, the quarter-final, the Ireland, Public Ireland are in the penalty shootout with Romania. And if they win the penalty shootout, they go through to the last 8 of the World Cup.
Which is unbelievable.
Did you, there's no prep involved in that
line
phrase or anything like that? No.
There can't be, Tim, because
you don't know what's
you could prepare for all manner of eventualities, but you'd then be trying to work the phrase, and you'd be getting to the point. The game was getting to its conclusion. You hadn't used up all your good lines, and you'd be trying to manufacture a circumstance in which you could do that. And you just have to you have to trust yourself. And there's so much going on. I mean, you've got to this point through having experienced life and various aspects of performance in life. They're a bit like an actor remembering lines that they haven't used for many, many years. And there's a lot going on in your brain as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So what's out front is the football match, but what's at the back is an accumulation of stuff. So on this particular day, the match was pretty awful against Romania.
It was a pretty.
and then it went to extra time, and it was even more awful because they knew, and it was a hot afternoon. Excuse me, a very hot afternoon.
Was Eamon Duffy slagging off the team at the time?
He was. I mean, that was the famous throwing the pencil down. They drew against Egypt. But so the game is when it gets to extra time in hot circumstances like that, very often the extra time's a waste of time because they've decided they're going to wait for the penalties. So they play out the extra time. It goes to penalties, We're on a fledgling channel, Network 2 it was called, RTE2. There's no TV3 or Virgin Media down south. So it's just RTE1 and RTE2 or Network 2. And the news is on, the 6-1 news is on RTE1. And I'm on RTE2 with the football. And I get a word in my ear saying, we're gonna put this penalty shootout on the news. This is unheard of. The news is going to interrupt itself. So the two channels are going to be showing the shootout. So I'm parking this in the back of my head and carrying on. And the reason they were telling me was principally, bear in mind that there may be some watching this who aren't absolutely aware of what's going on. So just give a little bit more info than you might otherwise do. So I kind of talk through the penalty shootout, and we get to the point where it's 4-4, and Tim Ofte steps up to take the penalty against Packy Bonner. And so this circumstance, Bonner goes down to save, I say, yep, and then now my head is spinning, because not only am I thinking they can win now, but I'm also thinking, have I got the numbers right? Because as penalty shootout, it happens so quickly. You want to make sure. Is it really 4-4? Are they really going to go through if he scores this one? But I had a great guy, Tom Flanagan, with me, and and I'm looking at his notes and mine. So I'm confident now that what I'm about to say is
O'Leary scores.
This is going to be it. So I give it the whole preamble, and again, bearing in mind, if you're a television commentator, you're responding to the pictures. And the pictures will be such that they will show a close-up of O'Leary placing the ball. And then they will cut to a wide shot, which will show O'Leary over the penalty spot and the goalkeeper on his line and the referee wherever the referee is. So I'm conscious of the television pictures as well as everything else. So I'm not going to be blethering on. I'm going to tailor my comments to match the pictures, anticipating the cut that will come from the close-up to the wide shot. So O'Leary places the ball, and I say, this kick can decide it all. And then I shut up, and I'm waiting for the cut. And when it goes wide, it just hits me. Anybody in Ireland watching TV is seeing this. And it was the obvious thing to say. And but as I say, you have to trust yourself, trust your judgment.
But it's timing as well.
Well, but that was dictated almost by the television pictures, which is as it should be for a television commentator. You're not driving the match. If you're on the radio, you can say whatever you want, and you can embellish, and you can make it a bigger occasion, even than it is if you want. But if what's the most important thing is the television picture, and it's what it's showing. It should dictate how you respond to it. And so that was as much a part of the nation holds its breath as what anything said.
That's our version of they think it's all over. It is.
It is.
I mean, people. Is it a burden to you? Do you get a pain in the, or do you go?
No. Well,
I mean, it's 5 words. The nation holds it. 6 words. Sorry, the nation holds it.
I know.
And you go, but
it is amazing, but
because
it's not.
The nation did hold on. It was one of those. I mean, that was, as you say, it was the new Ireland and all of that, and ole, and
there was a press conference in Dublin Castle at that very moment. Because Ireland was concluding its 6-month presidency of the EU. And Charlie Haughey, the then Taoiseach, interrupted the press conference and said, ladies and gentlemen, there's something happening here that's very important for Ireland. They could be about to qualify for the quarter-final of the World Cup. We'll pause this briefing and just watch the TVs. And they did. And so that was another big thing at the time that even at the top level of government, Europe stopped for that moment that the Irish nation held its breath. And you ask, is it a burden? No, it's not a burden at all, because it wasn't something that was immediately apparent that was carried the weight that it ultimately did. It was only afterwards, when it was all over and people are thinking back, they think, my goodness, that was quite the
reeling
moment.
In the ears, and every time anybody mentions.
But you know yourself, if you have nailed it, and you don't necessarily of course you set out to nail it, but you don't know that necessarily you have. Maybe until after the event, when you've finished your show, you've come out, you're chatting up about it, and somebody's in the green room with you that you weren't expecting to hear from. They say, Tim, Damon, that was just that just
nailed it.
And it's only then that you begin to realise. And then it's an immense source of pride that you actually rose to that occasion when you had to.
Yeah.
A bit like scoring the winning goal.
Can we talk about music? Because a
Oh,
lot of
please
people
do.
don't. I mean, this is a terrible thing to say. I didn't even know that you had. Because partition has worked to a certain extent. Well, I don't watch an awful lot of RT or, but I'm a fan of classical music. I listen to classic FM. But you have a show on Lyric FM,
Yes.
and you've been
Yeah.
a massic music fan and have been classical music fan for many years.
Well, I was a typical teenager. Wanted to be a rock star, but bubbling away in the background was the fact that as a child I'd been put up on a piano stool and made to go through the beginnings of the grades, and so that was a course of education that I went through, doing all the piano grades. That led me into a situation at school where in the music class, when they were putting together a small orchestra at age 9 or 10, and those kids who had never read a score and didn't read music were being taught how to read music off a stave, and they were given the melody line. And the instrument they were given to practice that on was a violin, because the violin takes the melody. So those of us who were doing piano, we could read the bass clef, which is where the cello music is written. So we were told, you're going to play cello. And when I went up to Methody and they heard that I had played the cello, in those days you were given your kit. My kit was a cello, and so I played the cello in the school orchestra through the years, and I did music to what was then called O-level. And so there was all this classical grounding, although I never made much more use of it outside the academic world. But it was when I was in broadcasting and Lyric FM was set up in 1999, and the head man, first head of Lyric, was a guy from Belfast called Seamus Crimmins, and I kind of knew him. And I met him and said, look, I'm very busy in my chosen field, but I do love music, and if you've anybody wants a day off or a week off, I'd happily step in. And Seamus did his best for me, but the most I got was an hour on Christmas Day in 2002. It hadn't actually worked out terribly well in terms of him finding niches for me maybe to slip in. But I thought this might be the start of something. I recorded hour on Christmas Day. And then, first thing in the new year, Seamus is off to the Arts Council, and I'm thinking, oh, that's the end of that. My hopes for a place in this cultural forum have gone. But I was in Moscow the following September doing a game, again, a bit like Scotland, Bulgaria. This was Switzerland, Russia, or Russia, Switzerland. If the result had gone right, Ireland were off to somewhere else. Yeah. Well, the Euros in Portugal, it would have been 2004. But that night, the result didn't go Ireland's way. And back then, mobile phones, relatively new, you couldn't take them near a commentary box because they fizzed and buzzed and interfered with the microphone if there was any call coming in or anything like that. So the phone had been off. And we got back out of the ground, and it's dimly lit suburban street in Moscow. We got into a taxi, and we're bumping along this potholed boulevard under the dim street lights of evening in Moscow, and turned on my phone, and there's a voicemail on it. And the voicemail was from a man called Adon Udul, who said, you don't know me, but I'm the new head of Lyric FM. Would you give me a ring, please? And I rang him from the back of the Moscow taxi to be offered a gig on Lyric. 90 minutes like a football match, and talk about where you've been and play the music you like. And it grew out of that to a football match with extra time and 2 hours. And now the Hamilton Scores is now 3 hours on a Saturday to Sunday. From 10 until 1.
And you get to pick the music?
I pick the music, yeah.
And you, excuse me for not knowing it terribly well, as I say, I love a bit of classical music. I love a good requiem. I love a good violin concerto.
Yeah.
Is it obscure music?
Not at all.
It's
it's not a classical jukebox.
Will I get Shostakovich?
You will get Shostakovich. You'll get T for Two, which Shostakovich did a classical version of that.
Right. Will I get Elgar's cello concerto played by George Hamilton on his cello?
Sadly, no. You'll get it played by the late Jacqueline Dupre. There is a better recording of it. You'll certainly get Elgar's cello concerto. You like a good requiem? I'll give you Fauré for sure.
Yep.
Or Mozart. Or
Verdi.
Verdi, if you wish. I mean, the way to sort that out is, by the way, is you either text or mail me, and I'll play it. But
well, there you go. You will get some requests from me, and I'll start listening to Lyric FM.
But the thing is, you ask, is it mainstream? It is mainstream, but it's kind of mainstream from not the fast lane. It's kind of mainstream from maybe the bit that you didn't consider.
Yeah.
Because there's so much there, and so much of the obvious gets played again and again and again. I like to try and leaven the brew by offering something that you might have heard before,
Right,
but not
okay.
for a long time.
Yeah,
or
you
you
mix
might
it
never
up.
have heard before.
Right.
Like there's a wonderful piece called Cow Call by Edvard Grieg, the man who gave us Morning from the Peer Against Sweden, all those kind of wonderful piano concerto. But this Cow Call thing is, he was inspired, as so many of them were, by native folk songs, and this is a Norwegian folk song. And he's turned it into a piano piece, and it's just lovely. It's only 2.5 minutes.
Cow Call.
Cow Call. But somebody challenged me to find a record or a piece of music with the word cow in the title, and I found this, and that's the only reason I know about it.
Is that how you relax, George? You sit
Play
and listen.
music.
Do you sit and listen?
I actually
to
sit
music
and watch orchestras.
You watch orchestras.
Yes,
Orchestras are good to watch.
They
I
are.
understand. Yeah,
It's
I'm not a huge fan of ballet, but I was involved
Yeah.
in the Grand Opera House, and ballet's alright, but I prefer watching the actual orchestra.
yeah.
rather than the-
Well, do you know? You'll often see on TV or indeed in the cinema, they'll bring you an opera from the New York Met or something like that. And when it's presented on a screen, the cameras are in places where you wouldn't get to if you were sitting in the audience. Like they're in on top of the soloist, or they're in on top of the prima donna. And it's the same with an orchestra. And lots of orchestras now put up their performances on YouTube. And if you want to research a piece of music, what better way to do it rather than sitting listening to it with your eyes closed? Is actually to watch it being played, because you get so much more out of it, because the director clearly knows his or her music, because they know when to show the flute player or when to show the guy actually when the moment comes that he gets to ding the triangle. It's just wonderful. It's great visual entertainment and the music as well.
I'm jealous of you. You seem to have the ideal life, my friend. You get to play music whenever you want. You get if Ireland get to the World Cup, will you get to go?
I won't be at this World Cup.
You won't
I
be?
won't be at this World Cup now, because that was a decision. Part of my decision making process was
Right.
I can try and hang in there, but it mightn't be that I get the call to go to the World Cup this time,
Right.
and that would be doubly frustrating. So I would much rather say, right, I've done 12, and that was
Right.
great, but somebody else has got to do it now.
My son will be covering the World Cup.
In Mexico.
In Mexico, I could have hooked you up with him.
You could indeed. I mean, I was in Mexico for the World Cup in 1986,
Aye.
which is a wonderful,
Oh,
wonderful
86,
experience. Wonderful experience.
Have you
yeah.
seen the Saipan?
I haven't seen the film. No.
Were you there for the?
No,
the
and I
main
wasn't
event?
there. No, because as the
It
commentator,
didn't get the football. He did. Oh, well, yeah,
As the-
Saipan
as the-
with the prep. Yeah.
as the commentator, I wasn't yet
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I was still back in Dublin, and it was our
With Stephen Watson in here talking about
yeah.
Stephen
Well,
Watson.
he was a world exclusive. Wasn't
Yeah, he got the exclusive on it.
Yeah.
The film is very entertaining.
I must get it.
It's quite
get a
hard
look
on
at it.
Mick McCarthy, though. I
Yeah.
think it's a bit
Yeah.
tough on Mick.
And Mick, Mick is as honest as the day is long, and all he wants is the best for whatever he's involved in. He's a straight down the middle Yorkshireman who knows what he wants and goes after it and tries his best to achieve it.
Yeah.
And I don't think the circumstances. He had to be the way he was. He had to be the boss.
Yeah.
Because you cannot, in any walk of life, you can't have the drummer telling you how to.
Yeah.
Did you know McCarthy?
Yes, and we
we know everybody.
and he features in our new podcast.
Oh, yeah.
We've a Radio Ulster's Connor Phillips and myself.
Yes, I know him well.
We have a
Gentleman who-
new podcast. We're only a couple of weeks on the go. We hope to get to 80 like you guys have done. But it's called It's There, and it's basically a positive take, looking back positively at wonderful moments in Irish sport. We had Packy Bonner on only recently. We started off with Ray Houghton, and we got a kind of a double hit with Ray because he scored 2 of the goals. You know, the one in Stuttgart and the
one in Italy against Italy.
In New Jersey, and the lovely line that came out of Ray's. I mean, this is the beauty of podcasts, isn't it? You never know where they're going. But it Ray's reminiscence on the goal he scored early against Italy in New York and Giant Stadium, New Jersey, actually. But he scored the goal, and in celebration he went and he
Spun, yeah, he did a
spun, did
double.
a somersault. Anyway, the game is over. They've won the game, and he's into the players' lounge, and his wife Brenda's in there with all the other wives and girlfriends. And Brenda comes. She said, "What on earth did you do that for?" And Ray says, "What?" He doesn't know what she's talking about. She said, "You look ridiculous." He said, "What on earth are you talking about?" She said, "When you scored the goal, you did a somersault." And he had no recollection whatsoever
Wow.
of having done the somersault.
Isn't that
Amazing.
lovely?
Yeah.
George, believe it or not, we have literally we filled an hour there and I didn't even start with anything. I kind of wanted to I wanted to ask you about footballers who are a pain in the arse now. Anybody is anybody you could because I mean it's slightly different in the old days. You could go and have a pint with they're now multi-gazillionaires.
Oh yeah.
They have PR people and all of that. Is it different now? Is it
unbelievably different.
Is it a pain in the arse?
It is exactly as you say. Before you would travel on the same plane, you'd stay in the same hotel, you'd actually get to know them as people. And these people, like Ray Houghton in particular and Ronnie Whelan, are friends of mine now because we worked together afterwards. But we also became friendly when they were still players. But now everything is done by appointment, and you even see it on the television. Like the Irish rugby team was hugely successful in winning the Triple Crown, and there they all are. If you get an interview with Stuart McCluskey, he's sitting behind a desk with all the logos behind him. Yeah. Whereas in the old days, if you did an interview with Stuart McCluskey, you'd be sitting on a seat in the garden or something like that. It's just not the same at all, and the access is very difficult, and it's just not. You don't get the chance to get to know them in the way that you did, and it has become more of a job than it was when we were doing it. When the interview that you would have done was like a continuation of the conversation you had over breakfast with them. Yeah. You know, it was like that.
Yeah. George, I'm afraid we genuinely have to, because we have another guest. That hour literally flew. I could talk to you for a long, long time. Before you go, I'll need you to do something for me. Could you repeat... Here's Tony Bell. Can he fix it? Yes, he can. From 79. From 1979.
Normally I'm asked to do
80-something minute. Never mind. And the nation holds its breath.
Normally I'm asked to do the nation holds its breath. I have to go through the whole thing.
1979 Irish Cup.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. So, here's Tony Bell. Can he fix it for Cliftonville? Yes, he can.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, George Hamilton, thank you very, very much for being on the guest. Our
thank
guest
you so
on
much
the,
for having me. That was a real lots of fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, keep listening, share and like and do what have you, and don't forget, Give Me Headpiece this week. There's still tickets available for the Grand Opera House, and get your tickets for Tim McGarry's Height of Nonsense tour, and like and follow. And in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful Mr. George Hamilton. Thank you, George. Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.